So this is Amazing Grace. Do you think about the words that you sing? Do we realize what we've gathered to celebrate? Sometimes we're discouraged by the brokenness we see in this world, but do we realize just how broken this world would be if God would say, I'm done? I mean, we do realize the reason hell is so bad is not because God's torturing people. The reason hell's so bad is because God's not there. The reason that we have good in our world is because the very creator of the universe is a good, good Father who loves us dearly, loves us enough to step in and offer himself in our place so that we can be restored into right relationship with the Father. We serve a God who's active and involved and desires relationship with us. A God who's not too busy for you to come by and complain about how difficult life has been. A God who's not too busy that he doesn't have time to be there in your struggles and in your hardship, but he cares about you and he desires relationship with you. And so the question I have for us today is that if this is true, how do we respond? How do we respond to the gospel? How do we live out our faith in a way that declares to the world that we believe that the story of Jesus is true? That Jesus was more than a good teacher, that he was God in the flesh stepping into the story because he desires relationship with us. So how do we respond? And to answer that question, I want to look at Romans 12. And in Romans 12, we find three different responses that we find the Apostle Paul calling us to. And the first one is to give our lives to God. Romans 12, verses 1 through 2 says this, "So dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." So how do we respond to the good news of Jesus Christ? Is we offer ourselves as a living sacrifice, not as a dead sacrifice. He's not asking us to lay ourselves on an offering and to die, but to live for God, to give God everything that we had. Growing up in the church, I was always told that when we place our faith in Jesus Christ, when we come to that place that we believe that Jesus is who he says he is, and we place our faith in the work that he did on the cross, we get all of God. From that very, very first moment that you place your faith in God and the work that Jesus Christ did on the cross, you get all of God. But the truth of the matter is that while we get all of God, it takes a while for us to come to the realization that there's parts of our lives that we haven't given back to God. And each of us have to come to that crisis point in our life where we begin to realize that while I got all of God, he didn't get all of me. Maybe there's baggage that we carry from our past, or maybe there's things in our life that we still like. Because the fact of the matter is that most of us come before God with a bunch of things in our life that we want God to fix in our life. But then we start walking with God and he begins to show us, well, you came to me because you wanted me to fix this, but there's other areas of your life that are hindering you from being all that I created you to be. And giving ourselves to God and allowing what He says to be true and right to begin to change the way that we think and the way that we see the world. And here's the best part about it. Is the only thing God's asking of us is to give Him the keys. To come to that place where we say, God, I will give you everything that I have. It's all yours, 100%. I'm not holding back anymore. And He comes into our life and He begins to change us and He begins to transform us into people He desires us to be. He says, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. The longer I'm a Christian, the more and more I am convinced that one of the reasons that people struggle to know the will of God, because here in this passage it says that when we surrender, He will transform us into a new person, changing the way that you think, and you will learn to know God's will for you. Just listen to that. You will learn to know God's will for you. I firmly believe that one of the reasons many people struggle to know God's will is that they're still working with their agenda. Because the fact of the matter is that as I look back at my life, there have been many times where I'm wrestling with God and I'm praying and I want answers. I want to know your will for me. I want you to tell me what it is that you want me to do. I want to be a part of everything that you want me to do. And God's like, but I want you to do this. Well, I don't want to do that. I want you to answer this, but I want you to do this. Well, that's just a little thing. It's not that important. But the fact of the matter is, it's only when we say, God, you get all of it. You go back in the closet you've been, like I remember as a kid, I still have a vivid memory of being a kid, the time my mom told me to clean my room. And I stuffed everything in the closet. It was like 3 feet high. I closed the door. And my mom came in, and she was smart enough to know she needed to look in the closet, and I was caught. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of us are like that with God. We try to clean things up and put a show on, and God's like, but I want to clean up the closet. And we're not going to find freedom until we give God permission. And one of the things it says here is that it says, do not copy the behaviors and customs of this world. The fact of the matter is that many of us look more like the culture around us than we look like Jesus. And I just want to say it because it needs to be said and it's important. That if we are truly going to walk in the ways of Jesus, we need to understand that no matter what culture or tribe we grew up in, there's aspects that are ungodly. We've talked a lot over the last several years about the tribalism that's taking place, and the Republicans and the Democrats, the conservatives and the liberals, everybody thinks that the other is the problem. But as Christians, we need to acknowledge that it doesn't matter if you grew up as a conservative, and it doesn't matter if you grew up as a liberal, it doesn't matter if you grew up as a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. No matter who your tribal affiliation is, that if you're truly walking with God, you're going to have tensions you're wrestling with. Because there's aspects of what it means to follow Jesus that don't fit with the people that you associate with. And there's going to be times where the people in your tribe are going to look at you and be like, you better shape up and get in line. And we have to decide, am I going to follow Jesus or am I going to follow the crowd? And if you watch TV and you listen to the news, everybody will try to tell you who the problem is. But the fact of the matter is that all of us need to allow God to come into our life and change us and transform us into the people that He desires us to be. And we need to expect that. We need to come to a place where we expect God to come into our life and to begin to change and transform and challenge the way that we think. And I will take it a step farther. Because there's a religious tribe that doesn't look very much like Jesus either. And it's easy to get comfortable in that tribe. And the fact of the matter is that no matter where our affiliation is, it's easy to allow our tribal affiliation to dictate what it means to do right and wrong. Whereas Christians, we have a responsibility to come before God and allow Him to change and transform us into the people He desires us to be. And that often puts us at odds with those around us because it's not always popular. And you know what? It wasn't popular in Jesus' day. In fact, they killed Him for it. But let us be a people that want nothing more and nothing less than all of God, and for Him to have all of us. Because when we get to that place, then we get to experience the power and presence of God. I want you to know I am more excited about this next season of ministry for our church family and for what God is doing in this city, in this region than I've ever been. I see God moving all over the region, and we get to be a part of that. And so what does it mean for us to be a part of it? And the second thing that we see that we need to respond in this passage is that we need to use the gifts that God has given us. In verse 4, he says this, and I really love this passage on the gifts because he doesn't use the set of gifts that we expect. I want you to listen to the gifts that Paul talks about here. He says, just as our bodies have many parts and each part has special functions, so it is with Christ's body. We are many parts of one body, and we all belong to each other. In His grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. So if God has given you the ability to prophesy, speak with as much faith as God has given you. If your gift is serving others, serve them well. If you are a teacher, teach well. If your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. If it is giving, give generously. If God has given you leadership ability, take the responsibility seriously. And if you have a gift for showing kindness to others, do it gladly. Did you know showing kindness is a spiritual gift? Did you know that saying an encouraging word is a spiritual gift? God has gifted us each in different ways, and for whatever reason, myself included, we have a tendency to compare ourselves to other people. And I don't care who you are, all of us can look around and find people that have gifts that we wish we had. Because I don't know about you, but it's really easy to look around the room and be like, well, if I only had their gift, my life would be a lot easier. But the fact of the matter is, God has made us different because we complement each other. And as I said earlier, our church is only healthy when each and every person is thriving in their sweet spot that God created them. Maybe you have the gift of encouragement, and you just kind of walk around and you call out things you see in other people. And you move on and you forget that you even had that conversation. But God is speaking through you to be a pivotal turning point in someone's life because they needed to hear it. And you know what? You might not get very much credit for that. You might not even have too many people coming up thanking you for that. But you're impacting people's lives. Maybe you're serving in a variety of ways, both in our church and in our community and in your home and in our neighborhood. And you don't always see or understand how God is using you, but I want to encourage each and every one of us that we as a church are only healthy and vibrant when each and every one of us, when one, and I can't stress this enough, when one individual says, my gift is insignificant, and hides it under the mat, and just says, it's not important, so I'm not going to use it. I'm going to step back, I'm going to spectate, I'm going to watch. Our church fails to reach the potential that God calls us to reach. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but if you were to see a thumb laying on the ground, it would kind of be like, what's the good of that? I mean, a thumb by itself can't do anything. Did you ever think about that? Like, if you just saw a random thumb laying on the ground, disconnected from the body, not functioning as it should, it would seem pointless and worthless. But I'm telling you that if you were to wake up tomorrow and you didn't have a thumb, your life would be miserable. Like, absolutely miserable, especially if it was on your dominant hand.
Yeah.
And maybe you're here today and you're like, well, my gift's insignificant and I'm just going to let it die. Maybe you don't understand what you contribute, but you do. And it's when each of us allow God to work in and through us. God has gifted you in a specific way because we need what you have. And you need what we have. The family of God, the people of God, we get to be a part of what God is doing in this region, in this city, when all of us come alongside and say, God, you made me with a purpose, on purpose, and I want to be a part of what you're doing. And then the last thing that Paul reminds us, and I'm going to wrap up here in just a few minutes, is that we need to live like Jesus. I love the ending of Romans 12 because Paul just lays it out. He says, don't just pretend to love others. Did you get that? Do I need to say it again? Don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. Rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble and keep on praying. Don't give up praying. Keep on praying. When God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Don't curse them. Pray that God will bless them. Some passages we need to slow down on because they're harder than others. Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people. You know that's in the scripture? And don't think you know it all. Never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you are honorable, and do all that you can to live at peace with everyone. I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I do want to stress this. The early church actually believed and expected that those who claimed to be followers of Jesus would live like Jesus. As we enter into this next season, I want to remind us as a church that when we stand before God on that final judgment day and we get ready to enter into eternity, God's not going to ask us how successful we were. He's not going to ask us if we won. He's not going to ask us if our team had all the power. He's not going to ask us how much money we had. He's not going to ask you how many people knew your name. But he is going to ask us if we were faithful. Did we live the life he called us for? We live in a day and age where many people within religious circles have gotten consumed with a lot of things that are not of God. And it's not our job to point fingers, but it is our job as a church family to say, what does it mean to be the people of God? And I don't know if you realize this, but Jesus was pretty clear that they would know us by our love. If we can't get along, we can't call ourselves followers of God. We can't just pretend. We can't just go through the motions. We need to be a people that are loving and living like Jesus. And the longer I'm a Christian, the more and more I am convinced that the greatest thing we can do is be attentive to the little things. We live in a day and age where everybody's trying to tell, well, we can compromise here, and we can compromise here, and we can compromise here if we win. We can compromise here if we're successful. But the fact of the matter is, are we living like Jesus? Are we living in such a way that the life that we live when we leave this building is causing people to say, if that's what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus, I want to be that. Or are people saying, if that's what it means to be a Christian, I don't want any of that? Because you know what? That's what's become the norm in our culture. And you know what? I have to agree with them, because much of what goes on in our culture today doesn't look very much like Jesus. So I close with this. There's really good news. Because our only part in this is surrender. You don't have to try harder. You don't have to work harder. If you want to be all that God has created you to be, if you want to love people that are unlovable, if you want to learn how to love those who persecute you, love those who hate you, you don't have to try harder. There's not a book that you have to master. It's simply giving God the keys to your life and saying, God, you can have all of me. So my question for each and every one of us today is, have we come to that place where we fully surrender to God? I'm not asking you, have you started a relationship with God? Although if you haven't started a relationship with God, you can start that right now by simply placing your faith in Jesus Christ. But I am asking you, have you come to that point of full surrender where you said, God, I know I have all of you. I know that I have all of the gifts that you have for me. But I want you to have all of me. And I'm going to give you permission to change my thinking. And you know what? All of us have areas of our thinking that needs to change that doesn't look very much like Jesus. The one thing that we're all equal in is that left to our own devices, we're sinful people. It's only when we give God permission to come in and begin to change and transform our thinking so that we can be all that God has for us. So if that's you today, I'm going to close in prayer. I'm going to invite you to bow your head and just take a moment in a moment of silence, to speak to the Creator, to give God everything, to allow Him to have the freedom to work in your life, allow Him to have the freedom to mold you into the person He created you to be. Give Him the dreams that you have for your life and let Him birth new dreams that He has for you, and allow Him to work in and through you in a way that brings glory to His name. Father, you are a good, good Father. As we gather before you today in your presence, we truly say that you are an amazing God and that you have given us amazing grace that we do not deserve. Father, I'll be the first to admit that I often come before you with an agenda and things that I want you to do. But Father, I come before you today as each and every one of us, and we simply say, here is my all. I give it to you. Every room, every piece, every aspect, I give you permission to continue to change and mold me into the person you desire me to be. I pray that you would be glorified in my life. I pray that each and every one of us would come to a place of full surrender where we give you permission to make us into the people that you desire us to be, to make us holy and set apart, to use us in the way that you created us, to serve those around us and to draw those far from you into relationship with you. We just pray that you would be glorified. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So let us go with expectancy that we're going to see God move and work this week.